But
With me? Sorry.
Go that way. Step in wrong.
Ask the chairman to proceed.
Useful water rates.
What's the line? We're going to need a bigger boat? Need a bigger boat? Thank you. I was thinking the same thing, sort of like duct up We'll swap out. How about that? We'll rotate. Here's my copy.
Chair, I'll call the meeting to order. The meeting for the County Labor Subcommittee on Renewable Energy is now in order. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Chaffin.
Here.
Senator Stroman. Senator Dance. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Today we're here with a number of bills. We've got 9 bills to hear and a number of patrons to put them out for us. John Garrett is our clerk today, and he's seated right here. And Frank Munyon is of course, our go-to staff member on these issues. And these bills that we have today in committee, a number of them have been reviewed by the various stakeholders. They've been looked at carefully, and seems to be peace in the valley on some of the bills. But we'll go ahead with the first patron, and it's Senator Deeds here. Senator Deeds, why don't you tell us about your bill?
Okay, 1197. About 8 years ago, in order to encourage the development of small renewable projects, we passed legislation that allowed small renewable projects to move forward without SCC approval. The problem, which evidenced itself recently in a situation, I represent Rockbridge County. If you look at the map back here, just to the south of Rockbridge County, southwest is Bogtown County. Projects move forward in Bogtown County that's pretty close to the Rockbridge County line. Rockbridge County residents feel like they will be affected by the project, and they don't have a meaningful way to be heard if there's not some impartial, somebody like the State Corporation Commission to turn to. The Bogtown County Board of Supervisors certainly doesn't necessarily, nobody in Rockbridge County votes in their elections. They don't necessarily care what Rockbridge County thinks. So what this bill does, it says that if it's a small project, but it disturbs, and maybe the language needs to be massaged, but if it disturbs 100 acres and it's within 5 miles of a county line, it goes back to the State Corporation Commission. Now, that's not a huge departure from law, because this existing law has only been in place 8 years, and I don't know how many projects have advanced for it. And it certainly would have no impact on this particular project. It's going to go forward anyway. But I've introduced this bill, and I've got a couple of folks here from Rockbridge County to explain to you what their position is. But in the future, it seems to me that for people to have some meaningful input in these projects, the people that are going to be affected, there needs to be some impartial argument.
All right, do any of the members have questions for the patron? Do you have
I have a couple of people here from Rockbridge.
have people here that support your bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, let's hear from you. Well, please announce your name.
My name is Lee Merrill. I'm
Yes,
an
sir.
architect from Lexington. I'm also the co-president of the Rockbridge Area Conservation Council. I'm also giving a copy of the letter that was executed yesterday from the Board of Supervisors of Rockbridge County. Both of those letters are in support of this bill. And I thought I would, rather than read it to you, which you may well be able to hear as I discuss it, I'd like to just show you why this 5-mile rule could be useful. This is a mapping done at Washington Lee's Geology Department showing the visual impact at distance and the number of turbines. Here's the Rockbridge County and Botetourt County line. North Mountain is the common boundary, also to Allegheny County. The proposed Rocky Forge development is here at 0.8 of a mile from the highest of all the turbines. All 25 of those turbines are visible at these distances out. This map, I have another that goes on up to Augusta County. At some distance, these can be seen. At close enough distances, there are impacts to people's property values, and that's what's happening in Rockbridge County, particularly in this zone out here. People's undisturbed view of this mountaintop and busy valley.
Maybe 5 miles. Show.
This is 5 miles. This is 10 miles. There's some people who might argue a 10-mile trigger would be useful. This is only visual impacts. The letter goes into our concerns about water quality, traffic, and a number of other issues. But at first blush, a lot of people in the state immediately look at this visual issue, and so we thought this would be pertinent to show you why there are effects from large industrial wind turbine developments, particularly that run 3.5 miles up a mountain ridge at the boundary of that are felt in the neighboring jurisdiction. And so the notion is that larger than small scale. I mean, this project is going to deforest roughly 125 acres for road building along these two mountain ridges, fracture the ecology of the adjacent forests to about 750 acres, which was an estimate by Nature Conservancy's comments, DEQ. So it's a large-scale industrial thing near the border. The neighboring jurisdiction is asking for the ability involved in it. Hundreds of hours from Rockbridge County have been invested in trying to participate in the PBR process. And the communications, the setup for it, and any number of things is proven insufficient from our purposes. So that's why we think the distance is very helpful.
When you say that property values are going to be impacted, are there any appraisals or anything like
There,
that?
in the research that this gentleman's group, the Virginians for Responsible Energy, has done, they've run into any number of expert witnesses in other states about the relative impacts, highly site-specific. Rockbridge County is largely repopulated every year by people moving in to buy the views. We have a flat population growth, and some people used to say there are a dime a dozen views and a dime a dozen in Rockbridge County. Too. So we don't have a local, we've got testimony, but no calculations on what that effect would, because this place wouldn't be affected at all. This place, which, you know, is marketable around its view, might see a 10% reduction in its value, or whatever the number is. But there are impacts.
Do members have questions?
I just one question, Mr. Chairman. How long has the current process that led to this project been in place?
I don't know that, I mean, but I'm sure that there are people who would say that Apex project has been working through Bogota County for at least a couple of years, probably.
Before, they worked to get their ordinance that this was a special exception, you know, in conservation zone. So they had to live for a long time.
Has your group been in Bogota County, you tried to?
When we found out about it, the night of the approval, we went in and made our remarks. We were too far in the process of already told them.
All right. So do you have other individuals?
I've got somebody else here, I don't know if you want to talk?
Yep, if I could. Stand up so everyone can see this. They're just, it's really a copy of what I'm going to be reading from.
You need to tell them who you are.
Yep.
And we'll be ready.
Please announce your name and tell us what you know about this.
My name is Jeff Scott, and I'm here speaking on behalf of Virginians for Responsible Energy. We really are speaking in support of Bill 1197. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about Senate Bill 1197. And I live in Rockbridge County, and Senator Beach is my state senator who introduced the bill. And we support this small yet significant change to the statutes defining what projects qualify for the PBR process. We know a lot more about industrial wind now than we did in 2009 when the statutes were originally enacted. Industrial wind has consequential impacts. And the way the law is currently structured, very few people get to say in consideration of those impacts. The proposed changes do two things. They give voice to impacted jurisdictions that don't have a voice under the current law, and they give voice to concerns raised when large-scale industrial development drastically changes the landscape. These proposed changes are about the rights of due process. The first application for an industrial wind facility that qualifies for the PBR statute is now under review by the DEQ. The application is for Rocky Forge Wind located in the northwest corner of Montauk County on the ridgeline of North Mountain. This
just a kind of an example of what, give you an idea of the size of these turbines, which are 547 feet tall at the tip of their blade, and that's taller than the Roanoke in downtown, the tower in downtown Roanoke. And then this will be typical of what the actual completion will look like. These are pictures taken from similar facilities in West Virginia. Since the generated capacity is 75 megawatts, this permitting process is under the 100 megawatts. This is the limit for a small renewable energy wind project. And they submitted the final application to DEQ on December 2nd last year, and DEQ now has 90 days to decide if the application is complete or incomplete. So one problem that is addressed by Senate Bill 1197 is the amount of land required for a renewable energy facility. One of the characteristics of solar and wind energy installations is to take a lot of land to produce energy. This might not have been well understood when the original statute was written. For example, Rocky Ford plans to install 25 turbines with a rated maximum capacity of 75 megawatts. While that capacity is small for most electric power generating stations, Rocky Ford will require cutting 150 acres in construction of 11 miles of road. For comparison, a new facility using natural gas that generates 660 megawatts, which is located in Oregon, uses about 26 acres. Because of the larger amount of land required for significant renewable energy production, the potential environmental impacts are increased. Therefore, we believe the amount of land impacted should be considered in determining if a renewable energy project qualifies for the PBR process and not just as generation capacity. The changes proposed by Bill 1197 address the issue. The second problem that is addressed is the location of a renewable energy project with respect to resounding jurisdictions. For example, Rocky Ford is in Botetourt County, but it will have significant impacts on Rockbridge and Allegheny counties. These impacts will be on the viewshed, property assessments, quality of life, etc. Rockbridge County has made huge investments in conservation easements. I think they're number 5 in the state, I think, in conservation easements, that are not even considered in any part of the process. But because the PBR statute does not grant adjoining jurisdictions any legal standing in the permitting process, the PBR has taken away any authority from them in influencing the siting and regulation of these large industrial complexes. In the current law, citizens of an adjacent county get the impacts of industrial winds without their elected officials having any voice in the decision. The changes proposed by 1197 restores the voice of local governments, and was taken away by the current statute. We support responsible energy for Virginia. We also believe that the PBR statute unintentionally took away some consideration of environmental impacts and the ability of our local jurisdictions to have an integral role in determining what is responsible for this. Senator D. Senate Bill 1197 to correct those problems. We hope this committee will approve the bill and send it on to the Committee on Commerce and Labor for their approval and submission.
All right, thank you, sir. Do you have any other? Are there those that wish to speak in opposition to this bill? Yes, please come forward, announce your name, and address your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Preston Bryan on behalf of Apex Clean Energy and Business Developer of the Rochester project. My very brief remarks will be in 2 pieces. One, to speak to the PBR process generally, and then also just to say a word about the project itself. First, I'd say that when it comes to renewable energy, Virginia does not have a plethora of special tariffs or tax incentives or tax relief or rebates or anything like that. One thing we do have that project developers recognize and like is the permit by rule of the PBR process, which was put in place just under a decade ago. That is a much more efficient process going through the State Corporation Commission, but it's not to say that it is an easy process. There are still years worth of work and studies and plans to do just to get in a position to present the application. The application can only be presented if the local government has approved it. And so years of preparation just to get to the efficient process. At the state level, there are no fewer than 5 state agencies involved in the review process. At the local government level, this project in particular, with a couple of years of planning, year working with the Botetourt County Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission approved unanimously, Board approved unanimously, Apex met with Rockbridge County
committee have any questions of the process? Are there others in opposition?
Chairman, Chip Dix on behalf of the solar industry, and we're opposed to this bill. Wagner has a bill that came out of the Rubin Facilitation Group that deals with permits by rule that is in City Ag this afternoon, and we prefer that approach.
Thank you, Mr. Dix. Any other?
Mr. Chairman, Catherine Bond with the committee, and we are also opposed for reasons previously stated.
Anyone else? Anybody else? All right, well, I note that this, of course, is a significant change in policy for this committee, and what's being asked here is sort of to use the process as a zoning law for to screen out something or to stop things that might have a huge impact, and I know the committee has seen that. Does the committee have any other questions?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. I understand the challenges that the patron and his district in Rutgers County face, and understand that. This permit by rule process is a step in the right direction of offering more renewable energy projects in Virginia, and therefore I would respectfully move to pass this.
There's a motion to pass the bill by indefinitely. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, I want to second that, and if I could make a comment. For years we struggled. I know there's a large sector that wants a renewable portfolio standard. X percentage of electricity will be generated from renewables, and I've traditionally resisted that because I felt if the government was going to impose that, the government's going to say, and here's where you're going to do it. And because to pass a law like that and not provide the land necessary to create the amount of renewable energy required to meet the renewable portfolio standard is a policy that's set not to work, and I can't support a policy that would do that. I think it's interesting that as we have this debate of how do we deploy renewables, get them into the grid, and do these things, that when finally projects have gone through all the hurdles, and we throw up more obstacles to try to do that, and it's deliberate, very vetted process to try to come up with a permit by rule to allow these things to move forward. I don't know, but I can't imagine that it is a very inexpensive process to have to go then in front of the State Corporation Commission, which further adds an additional cost. It can be a very, very large cost to present a case in front of the State Corporation Commission, which only adds to the cost as one would eyeball and see whether or not we want to deploy a renewable energy project in here, making it that much more difficult to deploy renewable energy in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think that renewables need to play and will play an important role in the overall generation posture of the state. So I can't support this bill because we're still going to have one more obstacle to try to deploy renewable energy throughout Virginia, and this would be my second.
The chair also approves and also seconds, and all those in favor of the motion to PBI, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Second on the list is Senator Edwards. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, member of the committee. I have two bills. And that, you'll recall that 2013, we established a pilot program for Dominion only to provide third-party purchase agreements
needs a lot of work, and so I'm gonna make the motion, and hopefully.
We've just mentioned you got to write.
918, it's my, oh, I'm sorry.
1388. 1388.
It's 918 is
Like a 1388 margin on solar panel agreement.
It's a 1388,
1388.
yeah. It's the
1388,
one I like. Yeah.
without objection, the
1388.
chair will strike, or recommend striking 1388.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, the 918 was your Senator Edwards, I apologize.
Senator Edwards, is there anything more that you wish to say about your bill?
Let the FCC establish the program.
All right, and do you have, do the members have any questions of Senator Edwards? All right, are there those who wish to speak in favor of Senate Bill 918? Anybody? Are there those who are here in opposition to Senate Bill 918?
Mr. Chairman, Catherine Bond was amended, and we oppose this bill for a couple of reasons. One, the pilot that Senator Edwards referenced that resulted from some of his legislation a few years ago is in Dominion service territory. This seeks to lift all limits on that pilot. We are currently only about 2% subscribed, so there's still about 98% of the available capacity in that pilot remaining. But this bill does a lot more. It also allows third parties. I'll draw your attention to lines 34 through 44 in the bill. It allows third parties to operate as utilities without any type of regulation whatsoever from the State Corporation Commission.
If I understand it, that's a rather large departure from the current policy.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Any other person that wishes to speak in opposition?
Larry Jackson with Appalachian Power, using the same comments that Ron had, we are opposed to this bill.
Thank you, sir. Please step forward.
Mr. Chairman, Chip Dix on behalf of the solar industry, and we're in variance with the Rubin Group facilitation, so we asked you, even though we understand and appreciate what Senator Edwards is trying to do here, we asked you to not act like it was.
All right, any other opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Andrew B. one of the electric co-ops, and for those reasons as well, we oppose the bill.
Anybody else? Do the members have any comments they'd like to make? If not, the committee operates by motion.
So just say one final.
Yes, sir. I'd like to say that.
Yeah, Virginia is way behind other states. I'm well aware of the fact we're taking baby steps, but I think we need to take maybe longer strides. North Carolina's way ahead of us. We're, in terms of solar energy, we're just at the bottom of the list. And solar is growing dramatically. Solar financing is growing dramatically. We know this is the future, so I think Virginia needs to take a larger strides than we've been doing thus far. Surprised for striking the Rubin. I thought you all had a pretty good idea there, but anyway, if we're not going to go forward with the Rubin compromise, so I understand. We need to do something, and I'm not saying this is a perfect bill, but we need to take some longer strides.
Thank you, Senator, for your comments, and thank you for your work efforts on your bill. Does the committee have a position with regard to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, it sounds like the stakeholders are still working on this matter, and therefore I move that we recommend it.
The motion is to recommend that the PBI, that bill be PBI. Is there a second to that motion? Motion has been made and seconded, and I do second, and all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
I'm going to say nay, just as for the concept that we're going to continue to work with us, I understand what the rationale for it, but I am going to support the fact that we need to, say, continue to work. And I'm sure we all agree in that.
I understand, Senator Davis.
You don't love my bill.
Your vote's recorded. All right, thank you, Senator Edwards. I think you had another bill.
Yeah, I do. Probably like this every bit as much, I think.
Is this bill,
Stands agriculture net energy metering.
Senate Bill 917?
It provides that net metering, electric utility net energy metering program, if it's served by multiple meters located on one parcel or multiple parcels, rather than currently the parcels have to be contiguous. They can be separate, but they have to be contiguous. This expands the net metering program. Inch by inch for agriculture. That's all that.
Are there questions of taken by the members? Do you have anyone in support of it? No. Anybody in support of the deal? Is there any opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Chip Dixon, again, on behalf of the solar industry, and we very much appreciate Senator Edwards bringing this bill, but Senator Wagner has a bill on ag generation, and we'd ask that this bill respectfully, with all due respect, to TBI.
Is there other opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Catherine Bond with Dominion, and we oppose the bill for the same reasons.
Any other opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Andrew B. one of the electric co-ops, and I will echo Mr. Dick's comments.
Anybody else would like to chime in? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if Senator Edwards would like to roll his bill into mine, become a chief co-patron, I'd be happy to do, because we do have a bill that addresses small agricultural net metering, and perhaps in a more thoughtful step that's pretty much got agreement from all the parties at the table, and you know, you're.
I would like that. That'd be fine.
All right.
Can I get a motion, Chair, for the motion?
I do a substitute motion that Senator Edwards' bill be rolled into my Senate Bill 1394.
Is there a second?
As chief co-patrons. We already PBI.
There's a motion to roll this bill into the other bill that will be here in just a minute, Senate Bill 1394. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Okay, next on the sign-up sheet is Senator Marsden.
Thank you.
You have Senate Bill 813.
I do, and we have two line amendments.
Yes, sir.
I need to get back there. Thank you. Sandy, may I speak?
Mr. Chairman, I'll read the line amendment, and I have some copies for the members.
Thank you.
The first amendment will be on page 5 of the bill, on line 276. At the beginning of the line, strike, other than a generating facility located in the Commonwealth that uses energy derived from sunlight and pursuant to this subdivision is in the public interest. You're striking all the italicized language on 276 through interest on 277. And then, Mr. Chairman, the second amendment is on the same page, line 278. After selection process, insert following, semicolon, however, comma, a utility seeking approval to construct a generating facility located in the Commonwealth that uses energy derived from sunlight pursuant to this subdivision need only demonstrate that it has considered and weighed alternative generating facilities that use energy derived from sunlight, comma, including third-party market alternatives that use energy derived from sunlight.
Thank you, Frank. If you pass those around, and is there a motion on those two amendments?
So moved.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. The amended bill is before us. Senator Marsden, why don't you tell us what your bill does?
Okay, let me just tell you the genesis of the bill, and then I'll describe the bill and what the amendments do. When Senator Wagner, a few years ago, had the bill that dealt with sort of the need for our power companies, Dominion, Appalachian Power, whatever, to deal with Clean Power Act, which froze the rates for 5 years and what have you, everybody got all excited because we threw in the idea that solar is in the best interest of the public. Well, that's pretty cool, that we did that. But the problem is it doesn't mean anything because it's not defined. It's not quantified in any way. It's, if you'll pardon the analogy here, kind of like pornography. I'll know it when I see it. And that's the same thing here with best interest of the public. So what this bill does, and the good part of this bill, and then there's problems with this bill. The good part of this bill is it attempts to make that, to define what best interest of the public is, and to make it easier for solar power to be approved in the Commonwealth, because it is in the best interest of the public. This legislation would allow the SEC to approve a solar project that is projected to be slightly more expensive as long as it passes a three-part test. The construction and operation costs must be within 10% of the cost that would be incurred in the construction and operation of a combined cycle combustion turbine generation facility with the same capacity. Any projected rate increase that would be paid by customers has to be within 2% of the projected rate increase a customer would see for a combined cycle combustion turbine generation facility with the same capacity. And because of these amendments, the utility would have to demonstrate that they considered third-party options for providing solar power. So, you know, the good part of the bill here, I think the beneficial part of this bill, is that it attempts to define what it is in the best interest of the public. The problem is in the application, obviously. You know, you're trying to compare a gas-powered plant, which is a 24/7 operation with an intermittent power source. You're unlikely to build a small gas-powered facility. Say you did 400 megawatts. Well, you're not going to build probably a 400 megawatt solar. You might build an array of solar in different places that you get approved that may equal 400. But the calculations here are really, really difficult. So in a sense, I'm speaking in opposition to my own bill. But it's very, very difficult to compare these two things. But I didn't want this concept to get lost. Is that when we put these things in the code, you know, to make people happy, we need to define them. We need to quantify them in some way. So this is, I think, a good idea with a difficult application. Looking for a home. If you can find a bill to roll this in, I would like to see this concept kept in place. That when we do these things, let's define it, because it just creates kind of a hollow thing in the code. And I believe what gave me the idea for this is the first solar project out of the box was rejected. And because you're always going to yield to what is in the best interest of the ratepayer, what is the cheapest, and then we throw this thing in, it's in the best interest of the public, that's never going to trump rate. So let's define what the heck best interest means, so that we have some ability to use that as a measure of what we're going to do here in the Commonwealth about solar generation. So that is the bill, recognizing its weaknesses, looking for a home to roll it into something, but I wanted to make sure that this concept got before the panel and before the Commerce and Labor Committee.
Yes. I don't think this bill would roll any of these other bills. I don't think so. And Senator Marsden was speaking against the bill there for a minute. I thought he was going to ask for a motion to strike.
No. I want a clean defeat here.
If we could gently pass by for now, so that at some later date may pass by.
I have no, I had no pretensions on this bill, on this matter, but just wanted to make this point. If we're going to do these things, and we're going to establish public interest, for goodness sakes, you need to define it or quantify it. Don't just throw it out there to make the environmental community happy that you recognize that solar is important. If in your further deliberations on these bills and in the future, obviously you folks are much more tuned in to these kinds of issues than myself. But to get this idea in there that we need to define these things before we go throwing them in the code.
All right, is there any questions of the patron?
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a comment, I think the fact that we have all these bills before us, that significant progress is being made, that in the previous legislation, required 400 megawatts from the investor utility, and allowed power purchase agreements for those that are both in the generation business as well as those that are willing to pay a small premium to ensure they have renewable energy in their company. I would say that we are making progress. Defining best interest, we just had a bill from Senator Dees on what is best interest, and begun significant progress. So, you know, I guess it'd be nice to put parameters around something that appears to be a moving target every time I come in here, and certainly the previous legislation we heard earlier would change the definition of what is in the public's best interest. Those that subscribe to renewable portfolio standards. It is a difficult target to get you around, but I don't want anybody to walk away with the impression that we're not making progress. And I believe significant progress in Virginia with solar installation, both investment by investor-owned utilities as well as those on the private sector that are moving forward. And I think we're trying to move forward with a piece of legislation to help facilitate that and expand it. So, you know, appreciate your comment, but I don't want anybody walking away thinking for a minute that we're not doing some significant things.
I appreciate the chairman's comment. It's clear that the solar industry is growing in Virginia, and it's clear that it's evolving. This is the first subcommittee which is designed for renewable energy. We've got a number of bills right now in committee. They're likely could be more. Not really sure about that, but we appreciate the efforts by Senator Marsden to define it. Are there those that wish to speak in favor of his bill? Are there those that wish to speak in opposition to this bill, Senate Bill 813?
Chair, I already did. To echo Senator Marsden's comments, seriously, thanks for bringing the bill. And this, we just struck the chairman's bill, 1388, which deals with power purchase agreements with private parties. And the Rubin Group wasn't able to build consensus on that bill to bring it forward. And so I commit to Senator Marsden and to the subcommittee that the Rubin Group still look at this.
Yeah, and let me say this, David. The Rubin Group has met extensively, and I suspect will continue to meet after this session ends. And it really is all of the stakeholders, and I think they're all committed to it. And some of these issues are so complex, and that they require the talents of an experienced mediator to try to bring everybody together. And I tell you, they've been working hard over the intervening year, and I look forward to some more exciting things, and maybe you can carry their stuff next year.
Is there a motion to PBI this?
So moved.
There's a motion made and seconded. All those in favor to PBI, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Senator Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have Senate Bill 1208.
Direct your attention to Senate Bill 1208, and Senator Weston, why don't you tell us what it is that you're seeking to do with your bill?
Which, Senate Bill 1208, I think is a little bit closer to a true community solar than what I guess is also being presented to the committee. This bill would direct the State Corporation Commission to formulate rules and processes for small solar kind of cooperatives. Now, these could be owned either by the retail utility or by not a for-profit or not-for-profit entity, and that may be made up entirely of the subscribers to the community solar project. These projects would be no more than 20 megawatts. They would have no fewer than 5 subscribers, and no one subscriber could own more than 40% of the share. Each subscription would be at least 200 watts. The retail utility, they would all be within the same service territory as well, and the retail utility would then purchase this generated electricity and credit against subscribers in their electric bills. This is not just for solar though, it would also encompass any project that people are interested in creating these entities. So that's basically it.
All right, are there any questions by the committee members? Any members of the public that would like to speak? Any members of the public in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Karina Bell, Sierra Club Virginia chapter. But this bill is not a Sierra Club bill. It was brought through a process that met over the summer of a broad group of stakeholders, both from the conservation community and from the industry, to developers, installers, and we also had some participation from localities as well. Several people in the room today were part of that process and were part of the stakeholder group that put together the language for this bill. And wondering maybe those folks can raise their hands. Folks who were part of that process. So the intent with this bill was to bring a different approach, but not a competing approach to the community solar proposal you see in Senator Wagner's bill. That legislation, and I think the stakeholder group that put that together, it was an excellent process. I think it's produced a really good program for community solar, but it is a utility administered program, and it does not allow for individuals to own their solar projects. So this proposal, which could be enacted simultaneously, just provides a mechanism for a program to be established that folks can own it and invest in their solar and directly own it, rather than having a third party build it and have the utility administer the process. So it's just a different approach, and it provides a different option for a different customer base. I think there's demand for both. I think that the Dominion Green Power Program, both of these approaches apply beyond the Dominion service territory, but the Dominion Green Power Program has demonstrated there's broad appetite for for renewable clean energy in Virginia. And so this would give those customers two different mechanisms to pursue. So I thank you for considering the legislation.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm Jeff Nicholson with Segura Solar. We're actually a solar installer here in Richmond and in Waynesboro. And to echo the Sierra Club's comments, we also stand in favor of this as well as the other community legislation that's coming forward. They're two different things that aren't in opposition to one another. And this bill in particular would create a mechanism that would likely result in several smaller, truly more community-based systems. And that's important to me as an installer because the smaller systems actually provide a greater job creation opportunity than some of the larger scale systems that can be done really quickly, in and out. The more community-focused ones actually can create a significant boom in the solar jobs economy here in Virginia. And so we'd urge you to consider this as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? On the other side, is there opposition to this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Chip Dix from the Solar Association, and we're not opposed to the bill in concept. This is a thoughtful bill, and as observed, it is something that would complement. I would say, however, that our association committed to the Urban Group process. The Urban Group process met, and we considered solar community projects, and quite frankly, it was very difficult to make those work economically. And so as a result of which, Senator Wagner is carrying the consensus bill that is a pilot project, and basically it's almost let's see how this works kind of approach. And so the solar industry would ask you to support that approach. And Senator Wexton's bill, it might be appropriate if the committee thought well of it to roll it into Senator Wagner's bill at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Jeff.
Mr. Chairman, Catherine Bond with Dominion, and we oppose the legislation for the reasons previously stated, but also want to point out just a couple of provisions in this legislation that concern us, focusing on lines 53 through 58. Again, this allows third parties to operate as utilities without any oversight from the State Corporation Commission, either on pricing or structure. It also mandates that the utilities would need to purchase all the energy from the facilities, and there's a few other provisions in that section that are concerning. But we agree that rolling it into Senator Wagner's bill might be a good solution.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Beaton with Electric Co-ops, we prefer the consensus draft.
Any other opposition? Would you like to sum it up for us, Senator Wexton?
Mr. Chairman, I would just say that the intent of this bill is really to allow smaller groups, apartment buildings, things like that, to harness the solar power and work together to defray the costs of it and also reap the benefits of it. So it would not be competing with, I don't believe it competes with the Rubin bill, it simply complements it.
Thank you. Committee, have any comments?
It seems that we have, like big business and a small business. And both, and it's like it's pioneering for Virginia, though, even though we've got some as far as taking that we don't have enough, mediation, if you would say, on the side of the experts working with the smaller group at this point, to really get the higher power that the smaller group needs to take yours, Senator Wexton, and others that are out there to the next level. So it seems that if we could find a temporary home in what seems to be a driver that's moving, with the understanding that it might have to find a home of its own, that it seems like the best of the undesirable solutions would be used as a patron in the business. So I think this is a good thing to roll yours in with the understanding that it not be lost in the shuffle but as the work continues, as it will, that they realize that they might have to carve out community versus small business versus big corporations as we go forward.
And Senator Dance, are you making a motion?
I'm looking at my colleague, I'm making a motion.
I would consider that to be a friendly solution.
Yes, then I make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, Senator Wexton,
Senator Wexton,
you'd be happy to join me on this. We have basically designated 2 pilot programs in that bill that will allow community solar to get started, take a look. When I come up here, I like to get things done. That's why we had a mediating group, so we're not in contention. We don't find these things going along, and we know a lot of work's gone into the bill I'm getting ready to present that I think, and I would love to have you hold my hand on the end of the meeting here, because they typically start as one, and then, I'm sure we'll be back based on the results of this. And we have a long history here, to take you back a little bit. There was a stampede probably 15 years ago to deregulate electricity, and Virginia said maybe we ought to start down that stampede, and we said, but before, as we start to look at this stampede, maybe we'll cap rates. So it's not the first time that we cap rates, and this was back in Harlan, help me out, 2004, 2000. What's that? 1999, and we started down this road of deregulation. We saw what happened in other states, and we quickly reversed ourselves and went back to the traditional way that we regulated electric rates in the states. And clearly, with the Clean Power Plan, we found ourselves in somewhat similar situation. Some would argue, some would disagree, we could back and forth, but be that as it may. And this is I believe, a step towards that direction. It's going to allow more and more of these to come online and move down that road. So I think it's the art of achievable. I hate coming up here and walking away with nothing. This is actually moving solar forward.
So you second my?
I'm second. I'm just practicing on making it more speech.
All right, so there's a motion and a second properly before us to.
Mr. Chairman, for some clarification on what the motion is, because are you talking about simply taking the bill number and Senator Wexton's name and adding it to Senate Bill 1393, or are you talking about rolling the text of her bill?
No.
Right now.
Text stays, name goes.
So the name is only thing incorporated, I believe.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
We're chief co-payments.
As I understand it,
Yes.
She's getting on the Wagner bill.
Her on there says
Which
we
bill?
have that connect. And the connect.
1393.
1393.
Thank you.
We trust you.
All right, on the motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Wexton. Okay, we still have remaining, Senator Wagner, we have your.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, since we practically described it just a minute ago, we could take up Senate Bill 1393. And what 1393 is going to require are 2 investor-owned utilities, both Appalachian Power as well as Dominion Power, to establish one each community solar pilot programs. The Appalachian being a smaller utility within the Commonwealth of Virginia, we require them to set up one community. I believe it's 4 megawatts, no more than 10, and Dominion's program would require a minimum of 25 megawatt community solar, but no more than 40. There are provisions that if it looks good and we think we got a better deal, that they can expand above those limits. We'll put these things into place. It does require that any program put together would involve a rate adjustment clause that has to come in front of the SCC to be reviewed and approved finally before. If we can move my substitute, if that works.
Motion to, substitute. And seconded, all those in favor say aye, substitute's before us.
There is a voluntary changing rate schedule, and I think at that point, I will let those that really spend the months in there to perhaps go in and delve into it a little bit more. I don't know who wishes to speak first, but,
I understand that this, that 1393 has been vetted and has had all the stakeholders looking at it and working with it and developing it to this point. Anyone who'd like to speak in favor of 1393, please come forward.
Chairman Chip Dixon, on behalf of the Solar Industry Association, and we support this bill. And again, this came out of the Rubin Group, and also there were some environmental groups involved in this discussion, so we hope that it has broad support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name is William Greenleaf. I'm a homeowner in the city of Richmond, and I have about 20 trees in my yard that are taller than my house, so I'd like to put solar on my rooftop, but I can't do that because of the tree cover. And so I would like the opportunity to buy solar energy, and this bill would enable me to do that, so I would like to speak in support of it. It is William Greenleaf.
Thank you, Mr. Greenleaf.
Mr. Chairman, Catherine Bond with the committee, we also support this legislation. I'll point out two things. One, the legislation does specify that there's a carve out for smaller projects, so much smaller projects, less than half a megawatt, so the sort of small business type projects that you spoke of, Senator Yates. The other thing I'll point out is lines, starting on line 129, this is a significant revision versus the originally filed version, and it specifies that the program costs will not be shared by anyone other than voluntary participants. So it shields any other customers from absorbing any costs associated with this program. That's a substantive change versus the original version.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Larry Jackson with Appalachian Power, we also support this bill, and I will add that there's an agreement with our group that will work to target ways that low-income customers can participate in this kind of program as well. Big success, especially in the Appalachian area.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Gregson on behalf of Amazon. Today, Amazon has announced 6 utility-scale solar farms across Virginia that are expected to generate 580,000 megawatt hours of energy annually, making Amazon the largest backer of solar projects east of the Mississippi. Our support of 1393 is just another example of our support for renewable energy in Virginia.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew B. Horn with Electric Co-ops.
Thank you, Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, Guy Rowley representing Powered by Facts, and we support the bill.
Thank you, Guy.
Lighttown, Virginia League of Conservation Voters, very supportive of this bill.
Thank you.
Mitch King, Old Mill Power Company, a licensed competitive service provider in Albemarle County and a strong solar advocate for many years. I support the bill. I do have a concern with it that I'd like to either have clarified here or fixed if it needs to be fixed. And I'd like to just take a minute to explain that to you if you don't mind. As you heard Ms. Bond from Dominion mentioned, there's been an amendment to this bill, and this is the first time I might add that I've looked at it, which ensures that all the costs of this program will be borne by the program participants essentially. And I'd also like to call your attention to line 63 for the reference of a companion rate schedule. It's my impression from years of watching the State Corporation Commission's proceedings with respect to companion rate schedules that this rate is typically offered, as the word companion implies, in addition to some other rate that the ratepayer pays. And in this case, I'm afraid that other rate would be the regular rate that you would pay as a homeowner or a business for your electric service. And the problem I have is, if you're already paying the regular rate for 100% of your consumption under the standard rate, and then you add the cost, the full cost of all this renewable energy generation that this program would incur, you're actually paying twice for the same kilowatt of electricity, once under the standard rate and once under the companion rate. There's a couple of ways that you might fix that. One possibility, it seems like the simplest one, might be to just strike the word companion, but I'm not sure that would totally contain the essence of what I think needs to be done. So I have sent an email to the members of this committee, which I sent yesterday. You may or may not have had a chance to read it. But the concept I wanted to bring to your attention is this idea that I think it belongs in the renewable energy definition in section 56-576. But the concept is one sentence and simple to grasp. And if you agree to it, I'm sure between now and the committee meeting you can work out the exact language that's necessary. But basically the concept is a customer purchasing renewable energy under a commission-approved tariff shall not be charged for the costs of non-renewable generation, non-renewable fuels, or non-renewable energy, except to the extent that such generation, fuels, and energy are used to provide such customers with ancillary services as required by such utilities, regional transmission entity. And that encapsulates this notion that I'm sure you've heard before, that renewable energy sources tend to be intermittent and need to be backed up with some other kinds of non-renewable generation. Those backup services are encapsulated in what our regional transmission entity, PJM, refers to as ancillary services. And they include, among other things, spinning reserves, meaning a generator that's actually operating to back you up if your preferred generator fails. Standby generation, which is generation not spinning but can be turned on quickly in the event that your preferred generation fails. And something they call capacity, which is in fact the requirement to have a generator relatively close to the load that you're serving in the event that a transmission constraint prevents your preferred generator from getting its electricity to the intended customer. So that's the simple concept. I have a proposal that you can put it in the definition of renewable energy. There are probably other ways to do it, but I think you need to avoid the situation that I think we're setting ourselves up for, where a customer who's paying 100% under this companion rate will still be paying the same rate that they always would under the standard.
Thank you, sir. Catherine, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
Mr. Chairman, I think those concerns can all be addressed through the State Corporation Commission proceeding, and I think that is the process that exists today to ensure nobody's paying twice. I think that some of the proposed language could be somewhat limiting. The enabling legislation as it is allows customers to choose how much of their energy they would like to get from solar in this case. So to the extent we specify that it has to be 100% one or 100% another, it may actually limit the program design options that, again, would have to be approved by the State Corporation Commission before offered to customers.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Will Cleveland. I'm an attorney with the Southern Environmental Law Center. Although we are not technically part of the Rubin Stakeholder Group, we were invited to participate in working on this bill specifically. I'd like to talk about a few of the things that make it good for participants, but I could also respond to the issue raised here. In lines 150 and 151 of the legislation, it says that it's describing customers' usage that exceeds the amount subscribed for under the voluntary companion rate schedule shall be billed under the customer's applicable standard rate, which means that you're going to subscribe to this program, you're going to get 100% of your subscription to that program, and only if your consumption exceeds what you have subscribed from the community solar will you be billed as your standard rate. So I don't think the double counting issue is a concern in this bill. We addressed it significantly during our discussions. I think the bill already does what you would like it to do.
Thank you.
I'd also like to point out that this bill will guarantee a minimum of 10.5 megawatts of new solar in the ground. None of the pre-existing solar will qualify for this program. It's new solar in the ground. Not a dime of this program will be recovered from non-participants in the program. However, participants in the program do have significant benefits. They will be able to subscribe at no upfront cost, no long-term commitments, and it's a portable thing. If you're a renter, you can take your subscription with you when you move. We support this bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there others that support the bill?
Drew Skinner with Prospect Solar. We are in favor of the bill, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
We'd like to see more done on the small scale, echoing what Jeff Nicholson with Segura said. It helps us keep our crews busier throughout the year, and enables us to expand crews as we build solar. We're an engineering, procurement, construction company, so that's what we do. We build it, and this will absolutely enable us to build more solar. So we are grateful for the utilities to participate in this pilot program and everybody that has put this together. So, in favor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mr. Chairman, Renewable, Sierra Club, and we support this approach as previously stated.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else? Well, yes,
Taylor Balak with Alt Energy, we also support the bill.
thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? You know, I know.
Jeff Nicholson, Segura Solar, we support the bill.
All right.
Make it unanimous.
Well, now the chair knows peace in the valley when peace in the valley occurs. And I'd like to thank Senator Wagner and applaud his efforts here for working with all the stakeholders, bringing this bill forward, and everybody that's worked on this bill, because it's clear that it is a home run for this industry and a home run for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And at this time, the chair would entertain a motion. Move the report and second.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend the substitute as amended by on line 5, incorporating Senator Wexton's as to LOA.
Yes, is that your motion?
As exactly what he said.
The substitute and rolling her name onto it as well. And is that your second? All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Bill reports. All right, Senator Wagner, I think you have another bill.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 1394, and I believe it's gonna be another Kumbaya bill. Hopeful. Again, and what it does is establish parameters for a program for small agricultural generators, where they may sell the electricity generated from small agricultural generating facilities to its utilities. It has, yeah, if I could move the substitute on that bill.
Substitute is moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Substitute's before us.
And again, Mr. Chairman, I could go into a number of details if you would like me to, but let me just suffice it to say from a 20,000 foot level, what it does is encourage, starting on January 1st, 2018, eligible agriculture customer generators to remain in net metering programs for not more than 20 years. It allows them to actually produce and get reimbursed beyond just simply getting their electric bills prepaid in yeoman's terms, so they actually become a net generator. It does provide for, in peak periods, actually getting a premium for that excess electricity. Up till now, the existing kind of net metering programs is you can be reimbursed for your electric bill and no more. And this we hope will be very encouraging for our farmers, small farmers around there, to actually consider, becoming little electric generators and actually realizing revenue stream over and above the cost of installation for that. And many times at peak load is exactly when solar can be an excellent generator depending on cloud cover. Interestingly enough, solar actually generates more on cold days, the panel it does, than on hot days. You would think just the opposite, but it's a fact. And if memory serves me right, I think our highest megawatt usage in Virginia a couple of years ago, about this time of year, when they predicted it would be summer, it was winter. It was a crystal clear day, and they could have used that ag solar on a day when they reached peak load, and without the service territories here in Virginia. Consistently, the natural gas utilities were at peak and had all 105 curtailment customers fully curtailed just to meet that. And so that'll give you an idea of both the limits of our existing energy system and the fact that we're going to have to add to the infrastructure if we expect to be able to meet these needs in that curtailed economy, which in fact really is. So I think it's an important tool. Again, it sets down the road. It allows the entrepreneurial spirit of our farmers to be involved in generating electricity, and I think will go a long way to seeing more solar deployed throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And beyond that, I suspect, I hope, there's no one opposed to the bill, but we'll see.
Thank you. Do any of the committee members have any questions of the bill? Are there those that are in favor of the bill? Let me just ask, is it the same group of individuals that was in favor of the last bill?
Almost. Sierra Club.
With great respect to the patron and to the process that developed this legislation, we do support it in concept. I think it's a fabulous idea. I would like to see it move forward. But we do have two sticking points that we're concerned about, two small points in the bill that I want to bring your attention to. One, is that this legislation sunsets an existing program that's been very successful in Virginia, the agricultural net metering program, within the co-op territories. Not within APCO or Dominion service territories, but within the co-ops, the agricultural net metering program will be sunsetted. And we think it's a shame to see a program that's been successful and be replaced with a program that is untested, and we're not quite sure what the outcome of that program will be at this point. Second point of contention is that this legislation does place all this agricultural generation underneath the 1% cap on net metering for the state of Virginia. We have some concerns that placing it under the net metering cap is confusing because this is not net metered projects, this is agricultural generation selling it back to the grid. So we don't know why it needs to be placed under the net metering cap. And also we have some concerns that as these are larger projects that we've built out, and hopefully it will fill up that 1% cap, but that then precludes other folks who want to take advantage of our net metering programs for both commercial, residential, and agricultural. They will be prevented from joining those programs in the future after that cap is reached. So those are my two concerns.
Thank you, thank you. Are there, I'll get back to, it seems like we jumped to the opposition, or at least the concerns. Anybody have any other concerns about this bill?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Aaron Sutton from Virginia Sun. We're a nonprofit organization that helps communities go solar. Last year, 3 years, we've installed 3 megawatts worth of installed capacity to help over 500 residents go solar. We do definitely support the bill in concept as far as allowing a very important constituency, agricultural generators, to benefit from solar. But I would echo some of the concerns and hope that in the future, some of the main barriers to agricultural generators going solar can be addressed. And that is issues with aggregation of meters in Dominion territory. We've had instances where folks are charged excessive facilities charges that make it more challenging for them to go solar, as well as this bill does not seem to address meter aggregation on non-contiguous parcels. So those are things we would like to see addressed in the future, as those are pretty principal barriers to a lot of the agricultural facilities going solar.
Thank you, thank you. When I asked earlier about those that favor the bill, that like the bill, how about just raising your hands so we get an idea how many people like this bill, how many industries. That's broad support. The chair would hear a motion at this time.
Before we make a motion, Mr. Chair, the patron, I think he said something.
I want to say something.
We did a little sidewalk, and what he's saying, and I understand, is like this is a process.
Right. Let me just say this. I mean, and I appreciate the concerns expressed. As you well know, there's been through multiple mediations to get to where we are today. This group is not done meeting. It's a measured step moving forward. I think it'll give all concerned an opportunity to evaluate, see how it's going, and it would be my hope that it continues the expansion and we start to address some of these other issues. But again, I mean, to get this diverse group together to agree on it, I think it was beyond a lot of people's expectations, even 2 or 3 years ago. So I understand, you know, and there are going to be pushers and pullers, and and you get a compromise like this, nobody walks away with everything they wanted, and we've gotten to this point, and I'm pleased that we've gotten as far as we have. And again, I'll say it now, all the stakeholders have spent so much of their time over this past year working to get to the point where we are today. I can't offer enough thanks. I think we're making real progress here, and I'm just pleased to put this. I got your concerns. I think we move forward in the process. We certainly talk a little bit more with co-ops and get some thoughts on that. And with that,
Senator Marsden should stay here in the
Senator Dance called me out when I didn't really want to speak.
And on that, Mr. Chair, I move that we report this.
Senator Dance moves to report. Senator Sturgill seconds. All those in favor, so please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Substitute.
The substitute has been
Include
Right.
Okay, there's one last bill, before the committee, and it is my bill, and I will relinquish the chair to Senator Sterling. And, I'll ask,
By the way, we are very good on heat conservation. Y'all haven't figured it out yet, so.
I'll ask all of you to direct your attention to Senate Bill 1418. That's a bill that I filed, and what this bill essentially does, it authorizes an investor-owned utility to locate one or more pump storage facilities, hydroelectric facilities in the Coalfield region. As many of you know, the Coalfield region has experienced a significant and substantial downturn in employment and also in investments due to a decline in the coal industry. And we're eager to have investments. We're eager to have investments made in the Coalfield area. This bill also envisions renewable energies being used as part or all of the power source for the hydroelectric pump storage facility, and the creation and the allowing this to go forward is declared in the public interest in accordance with the terms of the bill. We think that there will be, we hope that there will be investors that will be interested in locating this type of facility. I and a number of other legislators made trips to Senator Deeds district and looked at the Bath County pump storage facility that is there, and was given an in-depth tour of that facility. It was very impressive. Of course, the way these things work, they work by having water at one elevation and allowing the water to flow down through giant turbines to a lower elevation, and it creates the hydroelectric effect. And then that energy is used at peak times. It's kind of used as a big battery for the power grid, and then in the evening or at low use times, the water is pumped back up. So it's a renewable proposal, and I hope the committee will bless it.
I think there's some line amendments shaking.
Yes, there are. There are 2 line amendments, and I'd like to actually.
Three.
There are 3. Pardon. There are 3 line amendments, and I'd like to offer those.
On page 4, line 240, after facilities that utilize, insert associated on-site or off-site. And then continue with renewable energy. The second amendment is after energy, insert the word resources. The third amendment is on the following line 241, after their power source and insert the phrase such facilities and associated resources.
Is there a motion to approve those line amendments? Second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Those line amendments are adopted. Any members of the committee have any questions for Senator Chair? Anyone wish to speak in support of this bill?
Mr. Chairman, John Rust on behalf of Dominion. This is not a Dominion bill, but it is a bill that we support. As you all are aware, we've had a good bit of experience with this type of pump storage facility in the past. And as the patron has said, it does act as a battery. It does balance the grid. If this bill is passed, we certainly would be interested in looking at something like this in the Coalfield region. And it would certainly be an economic driver for that region. So we support it.
Ray Jackson with Appalachian Power, and as Mr. Russ said, we were very much supportive of this. This wasn't our bill, but I was interested in looking at other opportunities. We also own a pump storage facility at Smith Mountain. It's very valuable to the system at this point, especially with respect to demand. So we look forward to
Chairman, my name is Will Cleveland with the Southern Environmental Law Center. I don't want to speak in opposition to the bill. We believe in this very much in concept. We've been asking for expansive use of Bath County pump storage facilities to back up renewable energy. I would just raise a concern that the bill is, to our mind, a little bit vague as to how much of the power would come from renewable energy as opposed to some other non-renewable energy source, and I just wonder if there's a way to clarify that.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the subcommittee, Steve Hayner representing Newport News Shipbuilding, a relatively small Dominion customer user in western and eastern Virginia. I'm being facetious, we're a huge user. Costs for this will be added to our bill, so I'm not opposed to the bill. I have a couple questions about the bill that I hope folks will take time to answer before this bill moves much further. I know there's another version elsewhere. Anytime I see a bill that declares something, let me back up a little. I was part of the process in 2007 that did the re-reg statute, and it was in the re-reg statute that we authorized, the legislature authorized, and we agreed to a fast-track process for Virginia City. Allowed it to be in the public interest, gave the commission orders to liberally construe everything, basically didn't completely tie their hands, but put some manacles on them to say there's only so much they could do with that case. And we agreed to that because it was part of an overall structural deal. This is piggybacking on exactly the same process, and I have no idea what the cost will be. I have no idea what type of project you're talking about. And I think those are legitimate questions to ask, especially considering that there are two other bills moving forward in this session that create major potential rate adjustment clauses. One related to nuclear relicensing and one related to underground lines. You put all three together, you start to talk about serious money. So I think these are, again, use the man's word, it's a little vague. I think it needs to be a little more out in the open before the General Assembly basically tells the SCC, you've got to do it whether you like it or not.
Francis Hodswell, I'm founder of a solar development company. I'm on the board of MVC. I am not speaking in that capacity because I was part of the Rubin process. I'm speaking for myself. I just have a question about the bill, and the reason I raise this question, my little company is financed by a very large hydroelectric owner. So does this bill allow for a third-party solution, or does it have to be a utility that owns the facility?
This bill, if I may, this bill only allows an investor-owned facility to invest in the Gulf region.
Right.
That's the language that's in the bill currently.
And does the SEC still have the right to require the utility to evaluate a third-party alternative, which is currently in the statutes?
Let's let the SEC weigh in a little bit about how much oversight they feel like they have over this and the project costs and the impacts and that type of thing.
Someone here from the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
Right here.
Garland.
I know that some of the bills have relieved the third-party alternative language from being operational. I don't remember, maybe Frank can help me if that language shows up in this bill or not.
There is an amendment in this bill, a second ago. We look at line 276, where it said the utility seeking approval to construct or purchase a generating facility. And this bill adds the phrase described in clause 2. And it goes on, shall demonstrate that it is weighed alternative options. This is a project described in clause 1, so that provision requiring looking alternatives would not apply.
I would agree.
So it's outside of the third-party alternatives.
Correct.
Anyone else in opposition or in support?
I guess I would just follow up and suggest that it's always a good idea to have a competitive process to make sure you're getting the best possible pricing.
Mr. Chairman, because this is dealing with how this is going to be implemented, would you mind if I did remark at this point?
I was just going to ask Dominion to weigh in now, if we consider that amendment.
This is the first step in the process. This is the step that will let us begin to do the determination of all the types of things that people have talked about. That would be a part of the SEC's approval. We need this to get started, but we'll still have a full proceeding if we go forward, in which all these things will be determined.
Thank you. Any further comments, Jay?
No, as you heard, this is a proposed large renewable energy project for Southwest Virginia for the Coalfield region, which hasn't really previously embraced these projects. The Coalfield region has offered Virginia its energy for decades and decades, and we're now in need of investments being made in the community, in the region, and we have the right type of topography, we have the right type of workforce, we have the right type of background to handle these projects, and for our region to be a good home. We hope it will be a pleasure of the community to approve it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could go down on some technical questions. It's my understanding that electricity that's generated goes either to a load or to ground at the speed of light. Is that a true statement? We have lawyers? Okay. Okay, no engineers. And the reason I'm going down this train, and hopefully as this moves through the process, somebody can come by my office and fill me in, is we talked about balancing the grid, but not all electricity that's generated gets to a load. In other words, it goes around, which is in effect, electricity that was generated, paid for, but not used, therefore not paid for. So, it shows up on the books. And the question is, we start to look at these storage devices, of course, as we start to bring renewables online. I don't want to see any bit of electricity go to ground that's not otherwise used and on its way to ground. And that would mean storage. So I don't have an idea how much of that is out there, how much capacity, a new project would involve, if you follow what I'm saying, and to absorb this kind of thing. I do know that steam plants are very difficult to moderate based on load. So oftentimes they'll generate, which is why I understand the Lake Newmar project was there to begin with, was to, if you will, absorb that excess electricity. I just love to know the balance, of what it looks like, and we really absorbed a whole lot more electricity that otherwise would have been lost. And because I think that weighs in as you start to balance the overall cost of the project. You need to take into account that, and as we bring more renewables along, of course, they're going to be available when the load may not be available, which would make battery storage. In essence, this is a storage device, which I think we all know is going to be essential to really bring renewables on in a big kind of way to be a major part of the overall generation posture and take away that intermittent value of it. But if those, and I know there are those that can contact those that can kind of whisper in my ear and tell me some things, but I can very much understand the concerns, and particularly of Mr. Hayner, of what are the rate impacts. I don't have a feel for how much one of these projects cost. I don't have a feel for, and I'm going to move forward with the bill, but if we move forward, I'd certainly like that. When you look at a project, is it just the pump generator part of it? Is it the entire dam, the entire infrastructure to create a lake part of that project? If so, how much are we talking about and doing that? But I very much understand that more storage will probably be needed. And this is the start of the planning process. I think we need to go down there. Whether we need to put some safeties in there as we move down this road, perhaps we can talk about that as the legislation moves forward. But overall, Mr. Chairman, I'm very supportive of the bill because I think more storage we bring online brings more opportunities to be more creative about how we generate, knowing that we can not going to lose that energy, that in fact it's going to go rather to the load if it's not available to storage. So I think that opens up some options for that. So, but again, it's a balancing equation. So hopefully somebody can get back to me.
Committee operates by motion.
I move to report.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Bill reports.
With a